You're listening to my various book presentation Flutter, Google's open source cross-platform UI toolkit. Flutter is a Google open source project that mixes in several other Google open source projects both over the years or created in-house, and also some public open source libraries and development approaches not specifically owned by Google but open source. With the framework Flutter has the goal to give developers the tools, the frameworks to create the graphical user interfaces for all the big user interface platforms. I will explain what is about, some pros and cons of the toolkit, some comparisons, and personal opinions about it. But first, I'll show you a demo. Here it is, an application that reads some content from the internet and displays it on a mobile device. It runs on Android, on iOS, with absolutely no code modification. The same code with some parts commented, since plugins are not yet supported on those platforms, also run as a desktop application and as a web front-end application. It tries to follow the idea write once, compile for platform whatever with no changes in some time in the future, and just run. And it seems to do the job at least close enough. And there is some progress for all the platforms. So, why close enough? First, because of the plugins. There are some plugins written by the Flutter team that are likely to be very up-to-date and compatible with the latest version of the Flutter SDK and the latest version of the target platforms. And also will probably target, if not 100%, close to all target platforms. And the open source plugins written by the community. Which library is supported for which platform, for which version. It is a problem common to all cross-platform and hybrid frameworks. The other alternatives have the benefit of time and larger community that have created the needed features in them, but time plays also against them with the ever-changing native frameworks. And second, because of the input methods and devices. Flutter will try to target a lot of the platforms, and the interaction with the mobile devices is with fingers, stylus, voice, proximity sensor, and lately less often with a mouse and keyboard. So desktop machines, laptops, and netbooks are accessed primarily with a mouse and keyboard, and rarely with other input devices like presenting pointers, drawing pads, and so on. TV devices today have the iOS or some Mac TV OS and Android OS on them. So the TV operating system today is complex, and the interactions that the user have with the TV is infrared remote controller. Other devices that are even none of the above, some IoT devices, could theoretically have a variety of non-standard input methods. The thing is, all these different types of interactions must be handled by the developer and cannot be encapsulated with one unique API, because all the interactions are different in nature. So to be able to feel like native for all the platforms and not to be actually useful, the one and only source code must be extensively complete, handling all the different interactions, mouse hover, mouse over, on select, drag, multi-touch, special keys like alt, control, escape, and the arrow keys, and so on. But even if not all events are handled, it is pretty impressive the amount of unification that the framework could do. Of course, if everything else that is custom for your business logic and needs actually works, and we'll see about that. If you could see about that if you try to use the Flutter framework. So how it happens? You could watch the presentation from Google team on YouTube that they have every year Google I/O presentations about their latest features. I'll jump into some details about the framework. Flutter has two core layers: the exposed Dart API that you use most of the time, and the Flutter engine beneath it that handles all the low-level stuff that is hidden to most of the time to the business application developer. Skia is open source graphic library, the C++ framework used in Chrome, both and open sourced by Google more than 10 years ago. It is ported to all major systems and give a base to Google and outside developers to create stuff above it and be able to package native applications for the different operating systems. Chrome, of course, is the top client of the framework, and when you succeed with something, you expand it. That's why they're building Flutter with it. It will directly and indirectly improve Skia itself because of the feedback and because it is all under Google's hat. With the exception of the SDK and the plugin community, the client developers are mostly programming in Dart programming language. If you have developed business applications in recent years, it will have very small learning curve. It is similar to Swift, to TypeScript, to Kotlin, to C#, and many more. The UI building way is very similar to Java FX declarative UI and to the new Swift UI. The Dart code is being interpreted during development with a small layer inserted during coding. So on older devices, or sometimes it may feel a little bit slower during coding because of the virtual machine in the native apps and the Dart to JavaScript interpreter for the web. Your code is compiled to native code ahead of time to native code for native apps or to JavaScript for the web, and it is much faster than just interpreting the code with some small layer and generating some native components. Let's hope that the Flutter or Dart team that handles the web layer jumps to WebAssembly soon, so the code in the end should get much faster with WebAssembly, because it will work around the nature of JavaScript that is interpreted. If you developed any business applications in the last 5 years, it will feel natural and the learning curve will be small, and you have all the expected features: no check operator, object-oriented paradigms like capsulation, inheritance, type templating, functional reactive APIs like future streams. It has default values for parameters, mixins and extension functions, and so on. Flutter team has built some material widgets like up bar, tab bar for navigation drawer, buttons, pickers, alert dialogs, snack bars, and some iOS Cupertino widgets like action sheet, dialogues, pickers, tabs, bars, and some native components that are available for all platforms like buttons, images, text, like rows, like columns. These are widgets that let you arrange something. It also Flutter also takes you could take advantage of extra space with flexible and expandable widgets that could get some percentage of the space. And Flutter API has media query, so you could display something differently on different screen orientation sizes and sizes and so on. Flutter Mobile was marked ready for production in the end of 2018. It currently has a stable version 1.5. You, as an app developer, you code in Dart Flutter API for the production, all code is transformed, translated, and compiled to native binary. Flutter for web is currently in a technical preview phase. Many of the plugins are currently not ported to the web. Google developers have a lot of experience of trans-compiling stuff for the web, like Google Web Toolkit using Java, Angular using TypeScript, developed by Microsoft. Now Dart language that is developed internally and open sourced. What is needed for Flutter to work for the web is a re-implementation of the widgets in Dart to generate the appropriate markup, JavaScript, and drawing for the web. And once all is stabilized, all Flutter code will magically work on the web from the mobile code without modification. Flutter for desktop is still in very early stage of development. The idea is the same as on the web and mobile. For Chrome OS, the layer below could theoretically be thinner because it is also developed by Google. Chrome OS supports Android apps and it is a target platform for Flutter, and also the operating system itself is Chrome, which is made with Skia and Web Engine. So for all other desktop apps for all major platforms, the layer below must be platform specific, like Linux, Windows, macOS. They'll probably try to reuse the code and the development experience of Chromium to bring it to the Flutter SDK, the lower layer of Flutter. But still, everything needs to be touched and to be tuned up to work properly, and this is not an easy task. Flutter for embedded devices is not ready for production yet. What is needed for it is the layer below the Flutter SDK to be implemented for the concrete embedded target, probably C or C++ code, mapped with the same functionality of the desktop environments. There are some enthusiasts that have ported Flutter to Raspberry Pi using some very small screen, so it is possible. If you need some native functionality, You could write yourself a plugin. It is currently officially supported for Android and iOS, and it is a straightforward process. You register a plugin with a channel ID string that will be something like a socket or remote procedural code. Then from Flutter code you execute function X on, and you expect some specific result, and you call it on this channel ID, on this socket. And thanks to the async nature, reactive nature of the code, you won't block the user workflow. There is no official UI builder from the Flutter team yet, but the community is strong enough, and there are some paid, open source and free options: Flutter Studio, Meta Flutter App, Widget Maker. Also, if you search enough, you could find a lot of Flutter UI clones of popular apps codes that are uploaded to GitHub. There are a lot of options out there to choose from: Flutter, Xamarin, React Native, NativeScript, Ionic, Cordova, many more free and paid platforms. If you are not forced to work with concrete framework, you should pick the one that you prefer and know best, so you produce something faster and receive the feedback from the world if your thing is good. Flutter, compared to others, has some similarities and some differences, some pros and cons. It has a state-centered approach, and the UI is rendered when state is changed, similar to React Native. It has fast reload, similar to all other platforms, and it will have some benefit, the same benefit like Xamarin, that is, let's hope in not so distant future, to target more than just the mobile platforms. It will be a plugin hell, very much like the other platforms, and with the time it may improve thanks to the community, and we'll see about it. Also, Flutter that does not use native widgets. It draws them itself. It has the pros and cons. To not be dependent from others is generally a good thing. No external change will break your thing in the Flutter code. But in the same time, the Flutter team and you have to develop yourself, test, verify, and call all the native components that are not available yet, and the components that the users are used to. And since the Flutter code is compiled to binary, code push, upgrading the app without going through the market, is not available for the moment, because it is tricky to implement such a feature with native code. The result of Flutter, for speed reasons, is not interpreted in production mode. So who uses it? Google, Alibaba, and many more. I've shown you what I've shown you is a work in progress of my app, What You Eat, rewritten in Flutter. At the end of the day, open source is just a label that attracts developers. Making something developer-centered, because developers, is a key to succeeding. Look what happened to Huawei. You give others the possibility to use without paying what you have created, but most of these users are technical people. The audience that in the end pays the bills and supports whatever project are the non-technical majority. And since some part of the developer community fall for the illusionary abstraction of mine, yours, open source, and so on, they give time, feedback, contribute to not so close projects, many times without a pay, and that is how big corporations and not and whatever size projects scale up the unscalable, the human power.